Ciao, and welcome to the Eclectic Collection. Today we have episode 31, Itanglish. I probably should have done this one a lot sooner. So if you haven't figured out by now or paid any attention to anything I've said, obviously I'm Italian. Mom's side is Genovese, a.k.a. from Genoa. My father's side was Abruzzese, a.k.a. from Abruzzi. And quick lesson about Italy, the boot, if you will, that everybody seems to know. The top part is generally considered to go until almost Abruzzi, sort of kind of in the middle, but a little bit more northern. And that's sort of the division line. So the northern Italians were considered the educated Italians. They were considered the ones that went to university and went into certain professions. And Abruzzi, and that division line, almost cutting the boot in half, was sort of considered the people that made peace between the North and the South, because there was always a lot of city-state pride. It's not that one side was better than the other, but they always, of course, thought that. Because when you ask people where you're from, normal people say what country of origin their ethnicities are or what nationality they're from and, you know, where they live. So, I'm an American, I'm an Italian-American. But if you ask an Italian that, actually from Italy, and even here a lot, they'll give you their city-state. So instead of saying I'm Italian, that means nothing. They'll say, oh, I'm Abruzzese, I'm Genovese. The South was always considered to be more of the farmers and the people that were workers. So the Abruzzi kept the peace. They were considered the peacemakers, and very often were the ones that are credited with sharing food. All of Italy does this. All the Italians do this, but they were credited with sharing food and having a meal to solve all your problems, which definitely explains where my mom got it from. But it is her mother was a Abruzzese as well, so it is sit down and have a meal kind of a thing. And that got me thinking, because most people do like Italian food in some way, shape, or form. It's so mispronounced. Now, granted, I'm a big language geek and I like studying this stuff and made a career out of it, but there are so many mispronounced things, and I feel like everybody speaks food. So this will either be incredibly amusing to you or enlightening, depending on if you're the person using the correct words or not. Quick north-south comment. So again, the Northerners, different cuisine, by the way, pretty obvious if you've eaten at legitimate Italian restaurants. Most of them will tell you from where they have their recipes or their interest based in cooking. But the North and the South used to call each other names. So the North was referred to as the mangia polentas, literally the eat polenta. And polenta, for those of you that don't know, is basically cornmeal. It's supposed to be a heavy meal after your first snow. That's when you're supposed to make it and eat it. And yes, all good Italians have a gigantic wooden stick that is hanging in a closet somewhere. I believe we have two, and it is meant to mash up the cornmeal and stir it, and it gets like glue. Never been my job, but I've always watched Dad do it. It's essentially a very thick cornmeal that you eventually put, once it's all smashed up and whatnot, you eventually put sausage and gravy in, and it's supposed to be a really thick, stick to your bones kind of a meal after the first snow. That's traditionally when you're supposed to eat it. But mangia polenta, literally manja, eat, and polenta, so eat polenta, was the insult to the Northerners. Like, go eat your polenta. Like, what do you know? You always have your face in a book. You're always educated. You just get fed basically a difficult meal to cook. And then the Northerners would insult the Southerners and call them terrones, like you're from the land, terra being land, if you will. So you're from the land, like, go be a farmer, shut up. So they would argue and make fun of each other. And the more south you go, generally, in Italy, you'll hear a little bit more of, I don't want to say slang, but more morphs and mutations in the language itself as far as grammar goes. But textbook Italian is rarely spoken, other than at university level, but it's what they do teach you to start. So everybody, like I said, speaks food. So these are just some things that I made a little list here, and I think you're, like I said, either going to be like, wow, that's how you say that, that's what they meant, or totally get a kick out of it because you grew up the way I did. So if you are Italian, you really love this. If you're not, I hope I can educate you a little wee bit. The first, of course, is just in no apparent order or reason. These are just things that popped in my head. Mozzarella, right? So mozzarella is a cheese, obviously. But so many people refer to this as mozzarella, or you hear people say scamutz. Yeah, I don't get that one. I never did, and my own family's guilty of this too. Literally, Z's are just not generally a part of, at least in terms of an ending. Italian ends with a vowel for the most part, and it pluralizes with vowels. So I don't even know where that came from. Like, obviously, this is morphed because a lot of the immigration that came to New York, which, by the way, I've mentioned this before, the Irish and the English generally were the people at Ellis Island that did processing. So when Italians came over, and notoriously the English and the Irish and the Italians didn't get along, the ones who could speak could kind of fight their way through their names. But a lot of people didn't get their name, hence the whole Michael Corleone. Really wasn't Corleone. His last name was Andolini, but nobody bothers because they just read the thing on his jacket, and that's where he was from. So they called him that. Well, a lot of Italians are named Tony, not because they're Anthony's, but because they were going to New York. Tony, hello. So they just named them that because that's where they were headed. And most of them couldn't communicate outside of Italian to the typically Anglo officers taking the information. So little fun fact there. Anyhow, the massive immigrations would generally happen toward New York, and you kind of have like a New York-based Italian, and you have a Philadelphia-based Italian. Chicago's got its own bit, too, because they kind of went more west later on. But as you see different regions, you'll hear different plays on the dialects of different pronunciations. So it's just funny. I definitely think that you can account for accents, too. Philadelphia definitely has its own distinct accent. We always joke about Kate Winslet doing that Netflix series and joking about water and how daughter and water are very similar. She's even done Saturday Night Live skits about it. Very true. I say water. I don't know what water is, but whatever. So I've done things like that as well. But if you just sort of exaggerate a bit, I'll say New York Italian because you account for their accent. For example, chocolate, coffee, they tend to say drawer instead of drawer. And you put that into the Italian part, somehow that could be where some of the words are slightly different. It's also an anomaly to me where a hoagie, which is a very Philadelphia product, somehow gets called a sub. Okay, I get it, submarine sandwich, but could be called a torpedo depending on the size of the roll. And in New York, they still refer to it as a wedge. But that wedge to me is more like a club sandwich cut in a diagonal, thus creating the triangles. But I've heard them all, depending on where you're from. And of course, if you're up from the New England area, they would refer to all those sandwiches as wicked good. Anyhow, I digress. Next one on my list is ricotta. Okay, so ricotta, again, a cheese, but people say ricotta. There's no G involved. C's and G's got morphed and mangled so many times over the years. It's just hilarious. So that's definitely one that I fight with my own mother about constantly. Prosciutto. Prosciutto is a cured ham, very salty, very yummy. People say prosciutto. Okay, there's no B involved whatsoever. Definitely not a Z. It's prosciutto. Parmigiano is, again, cheese, making a lot of headway here. But people tend to say Parmesan. Well, that je sound is French, so just throw it out the window because a double G or a double Z or any kind of double consonant, a doppia, if you will, a double, in Italian is meant to be stressed and accented. So not changed, switched, and run away from. Just like when you're saying formaggio, which is the word for cheese, people say, oh, fromage. Yeah, fromage is French. That's great. That's cheese in French, but that's not Italian. It's formaggio. And Joe DiMaggio, if you will, Joe DiMaggio was the baseball guy. Again, I hate baseball. Why is that always coming into my world? God, it's just a good example sometimes. But people say DiMaggio. No, that's French class down the hall. Not a good thing. So always remember that you exaggerate on purpose. Again, with the morphs, if you will, gnocchi. A GN is kind of the equivalent of an enye in Spanish with the tilde. A plain N is an N, but an N with a squiggle, if you will, on top of it makes kind of like piñata, that kind of idea. So gnocchi is almost like you're not saying gnocchi. Okay, I've had people say gnocchis. It makes me want to throw up. They're not gnocchis. They're not gnocchis. It's gnocchi. Cannolis. I never thought twice about, gnocchi, by the way, is pasta. They're stabbable pasta, if you will, not twirlable. Cannoli is a dessert, and it's usually ricotta with chocolate chips or vanilla or chocolate pudding inside a shell that's generally powdered sugar on top. Really yummy. Get them in the mini size too if you want them. And cannolis, I've actually heard, and now see, I think this is a New York thing. I always said cannoli, always heard cannoli, but my buddies that are from northern Jersey and New York area say ganol. And again, that C turns into a G. No G's involved, nothing about it, not a thing, but they will say that. Lazy tongue, I guess. Pasta e fagioli. Okay, literally pasta and beans. So A is an E, okay? Pasta, A. Everybody gets the pasta part right. I have heard so many morphs of that. I've heard people say fazool. That's probably the most common. I've heard people morph it every which way. But fagioli are beans. So literally pasta and beans. But that's just one of those famous ones that people always mess around with. And then pasta versus macaroni. Let's have a quick little talk about that. So most people are okay with referring either way to that. But don't call linguine, which is a style or type of macaroni. Don't refer to all macaroni as linguine. Okay, that's not a thing. Macaroni is literally the overarching theme, if you will. Don't think mac and cheese. I mean, yes, I get it. We say that for craft purposes and for American dishes. But pasta generally was, or is, I should say, stabbable. So things like gnocchi, things like fusilli, things like ziti, things like cavatelli, things that are a little more dense. Orecchiette, anything thicker, stabbable. Tortellini. And macaroni is generally twirlable. So just put that there. So linguine is a style of macaroni. And macaroni itself is actually a colonial word because the style of macaroni, stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni, was the macaroni style of their dress at the time. And it was, the era of, what can I say, quilled pens. So it's kind of funny that they did that because really we wouldn't have, essentially noodles is what we're talking about. But Marco Polo went over to China and stole the noodles and started referring to it as macaroni or, spaghetti, if you will. But of course, again, spaghetti is a style. So getting into the fight over twirling, I have to bring this up because I can hear my mom screaming in my ear. One more fight that mom and dad always had, whether or not to use a spoon. Now, I don't use one because mom said. My father always did. And that is a big thing. And again, think about your background. Did you grow up with or without a spoon when you're twirling? Very many people just, use the dish and twirl. And there is an art to twirling. If you're not a good twirler, you should practice. You never, ever, ever should let a forkful of any kind of macaroni, don't pull it up in the air 6 feet and then try and twirl it out of your bowl. That's just a rookie move. And definitely don't take on too much or too little. You kind of have to separate it a little bit. And a true pro will use the side of their dish or bowl to twirl and then get it all together as much as you can. There's always going to be danglers sometimes, but that's that. Hence, a lot of people tend to wear a napkin like a bib. But Southern Italians generally will use a spoon. They will take a tablespoon and they will use it to twirl into. And my father always did this. And my mom would get crazy because you were taught not to do that because the Northerners don't do that. So think about where you're from and whether or not you use a spoon and do your twirl. Just thought I'd bring up as many fights as I can. While we're at it, gravy versus sauce. Well, let me just tell you, it's gravy, period, end of story. It's not a dispute. This isn't a open for debate. Sauce, if you will, the concept of salsa. Okay, and they'll say sals, just like salsa in Spanish, but tomato sals, they tend to cut off the end when they're saying that, which they shouldn't, because they always say those vowels. That can get you into trouble. Was usually tomato paste and part of the gravy to make it gravy. So it's like you use the sals, if you will, to make gravy. But it is a gravy. Gravy is not brown gravy. Yes, it can be. Certainly, I've had brown gravy as well. You could have white gravy with, in the South, they use chicken gravy and grits and whatnot. But gravy's gravy. And in the case of a red gravy, which could be a marinara, not marinade. marinara, and that is generally a meatless gravy, or you could have a bolognese, which generally has the meats. And what are those meats? Well, in order to do a true, according to my mother, very reliable source, generally it is veal, beef, and pork with a bone in it. That is the official combination of the trifecta of meats that are required for proper gravy. And it has to simmer all day, and then people like Mom take pieces of bread and dip it in there and make gravy sandwiches, which my family's always been into. Tortelloni versus tortellini. So Italian pluralizes with vowels, and they tend to generalize size with vowels as well. So tortelloni would be a larger version of tortellini, same concept and shape, but you would have plurals because the I on the end signifies a plural. And the oni, if you will, would be a larger version of that, ini being a smaller one. That's just what they call a diminutive in language. So if you have something is, good or wonderful, and then you have, so if it's bello, but it's like really fantastic, it's bellissimo. So you have the extra oomph on the end, if you will. Again, oomph being a mom word, I'm just throwing it out there. What does that equate to? I don't know. I always said that to Mom. Mom, how much is in an oomph? Can you measure an oomph? What exactly is an oomph? And she always told me not to get funny, but I'm totally serious. I'm still looking for the answer to that. So if you know that, please let me know. So you have that with the pluralization and the size, if you will. So diminutives being a smaller version of that. These are all things that, when referring to Americans, or I'll say non-Italians, they tend to say American. It's just Americano. And they took the word Americano and they squished it a little bit. And you'll hear Italians will say, oh, Madonna, and they've got their fingers together kind of chastising you from the face. They do a lot of facial characters, che buono, che malo, whatever it is, good or bad. Again, Madonna coming from Madonna, as in referencing Mary. So, Madonna mia, my Mary, if you will, my mother of JC, if you will. So they often say that a lot, and that's just a truncated version of that. I have to say one of the most popular mispronunciations I've seen, aside from like little kids saying things like sketties, obviously it's spaghetti, but a really bad mispronunciation happens in lunch meat. People say gorigin. Again, I think that's a Philly thing. It's cotechino. And cotechino was still available. I can't say I've ever eaten it because I was warned by my father and I never touched it. It was sort of all the scraps of the lunch meat. It's the pimento loaf, if you will, on the Italian side, of all the different scraps of lunch meat sort of put together in a mold, if you will, and it was very cheap and it was easy to buy. And my father grew up poor, so he was constantly eating it and he hated it. And, do you really want to eat gristle? I mean, I'm not into scrapple, but people say they like it. Same concept, I guess, but again, in thin lunch meat style. So let's talk about thin lunch meat. All good Italians get crazy if you make their lunch meat thick. Now, let me just tell you, shop owners, if anybody's listening, because my peeps that I love and I'm loyal to, especially in the Delco area, they know better because there's a lot of Italians in the Delco area. You have to have your lunch meat cut thin. If you don't, I don't even know what you're thinking. I mean, I guess like other people like gigantor slabs of meats and cheeses, but that's disgusting, first of all. And ew, who wants to bite through a mountain of random cheese and meat products stacked on top of one another as tall as a Monte Cristo? No one I know. It's nicer to take thin pieces and fluff them up and make it look pretty. If you're buying a thing called cold cuts, I don't want to know you, okay? Cold cuts are disgusting. That's stuff that people like Oscar Mayer put in a prefab thing, or Kraft singles. It's plastic. It's not cheese. Let's be honest. It's like Velveeta. It's going to outlive cockroaches in the zombie apocalypse. I mean, Twinkies, I have mad love for them, but let's be real. They're probably all chemical. So, ew, and ew. If you like things like that, you're not eating anything real, A. B, it's way too thick, and then you're used to it, and I guess that's where you got used to it. For God's sake, patronize a local deli, go to a decent Italian place, and ask for your lunch meat thin. Which you shouldn't even have to ask for it thin, because if you just identify yourself as an Italian or a wannabe, they will definitely do it for you. That is like par for the course, because they will freak out and inspect. I do it, and you should too. I want to see through it, is what you need to say. I don't care what you're getting. It could be cheese. Is it a pain to cut that way? Yes. Do they have to go and clean it more often? Absolutely. Is it worth it? 100 million percent. So, yes, I want it super thin. You're not going to walk into a general store like Acme or Giant or whatever and get super thin lunch meat unless you literally lecture the person first. And that's not where you're buying super quality, super Italian meats to begin with. So, always ask for super, super thin lunch meat. It's lunch meat, by the way. It's not a cold cut. We call it lunch meat. Learn the lingo. Love it. Live it. Another mispronounced lunch meat. Capicola. So capicola is like a spicy ham. It could be hot or sweet cap. And people tend to say gabagool. That just sounds disgusting. Why would you want to eat anything that sounds like ghosts all mashed up? I wouldn't. But that's what people say. And again, that CG thing. You keep seeing a theme where you should by now, where C's and G's get morphed over time. And I don't know, it's just pronunciation. I kind of feel like that one was a Philly thing, but again, I'm just crediting from what I have learned through experience and language. One thing that makes me bananas, espresso. No. With all the rage in coffee, such as the earth is crazy about right now, espresso, okay? ESPRESSO, espresso. Again, the double L or double S or any double consonant, a doppia, a double, you drag out a little bit. Espresso, mama. It's not you being pretentious or obnoxious. That's just how Italian is pronounced. So there's a drag on the word on purpose if there's a double consonant. You never use an X. And frankly, you just don't even deserve to drink the coffee if you're saying that. I can't stand when people say it. It's like people who say escape. That's not a word. Escape. Hello, escape. It is not escape. X Games have nothing to do with it. Like, really? Come on. Limoncello. Limoncello is a wonderful cordial. It's a light liqueur, generally made from lemons, but that's just because it's limoncello. You can get other cellos, if you will. You could get lime cello. You could get orange cello. You can get chocolate cello, or homemade anisette, which is people's. It's funny because star anise is technically the spice, but Italians tend to call it anisette or anisetta. But each culture pretty much knows it. It's a black licorice taste. If you like sambuco or ouzo, same kind of smell and flavor, whether you're baking with it or drinking it. It's not something you'd pour a big glass of. It's something you'd have in a small cordial glass. But there's lots of cellos out there. And this is a harmless, shameless plug for my buddy Joanne, who owns Limoncello. She owns a limoncello company, actually, called Polyad, and she's in South Philadelphia, not too far from Mancuso's Cheese. And I could endorse both of those places. They're in South Philly and off Passyunk Avenue, and you should definitely go if you want to have quality product. She's fantastic. She's been making her own cellos, and she has quite a few. She even has banana cream and has a strawberry one and a vanilla one. It's very cool, and I think she even has a mango one. So there's quite a lot of different cellos. She opened my eyes to many a cello and can make them for you. So I go down there and get a really pure, homemade, awesome, crisp limoncello. And you can make your own. I'm not that talented, but you can make your own. I've had friends that have done it for different events and things. But I just call Jenny and say, hey, help me out. So go visit Polyad, which is also kind of a slang word, also misspelled, meaning drunk. So it's kind of a play on that word in Italian. Broccoli arabe, right? So nobody ever says the arabe. They always say arabe. It's literally bitter broccoli. So there's broccoli that's like normal plain old broccoli that you get in the store. There's broccolini, and then there's broccoli arabe. So broccoli arabe is really a broccoli that looks like a tighter bunch of sprigs that are smaller. It's not as widespread as like a regular head of broccoli. And broccolini is a hybrid between regular broccoli and broccoli arabe. So it's actually a little stringier, a little thinner, almost could look like a cross between some sort of spinach and some sort of radish greens, like that kind of the greens on radishes. It's almost like that. So there's different types of broccolis out there. But generally people can... garlic is a staple, so if you're not in love with garlic, you probably don't want to eat Italian food. But garlic is usually involved in all of it, and you can certainly eat this cold or hot. Things like chicken cutlets or definitely people tend to put broccoli rabe on certain hoagies, which leads me to another topping that's often mispronounced, and that is bruschetta. People say bruschetta. I get why you say it, but it's technically bruschetta. So let's have a little talk about that. The CH is pronounced K, like a K, if you will. So there's soft and hard C's. A C that's soft, for example, ceiling in English, and a C that's a hard C like cat. So it makes the K noise, if you will. So bruschetta with a CH is a K sound, although people want to make a sh because it looks like that, and we tend to do that in English. I mean, think about it. You say Pinocchio, you don't say Pinocchio or Pinocchio. You don't do that. So you have a CH. Anyhow, bruschetta, you could put that also on chicken cutlet or sandwich. You see that a lot and Primo sandwiches and hoagies. They're a pretty decent Italian chain as far as legitimate meats and bread go. Because the bread can make the sandwich too. You kind of have to argue about bread. Luckily, pane is pane and that's it. And that's bread. Most people are pretty cool with that. But bread does make your sandwich. And it's interesting with like the toppings and all leading to essentially the chicken cutlet fight, because there's certain things that just go along in the lore of Italian. So chicken cutlets, always a favorite meal. Yes, it kind of started out as veal cutlets. Now, I don't know if this happened as a morph over time in just my family or the world, but people that I've talked to, a staple yummy dinner is always chicken cutlets. And the rule is, and I mean this like in pure sincerity, because again, you're going to get this and laugh, or you're going to be like, what? If you're going to have chicken cutlets, which first of all, you need to just start with like 5 pounds of chicken cutlets, because there's never enough, because people take them to lunch the next day, or maybe throw broccoli rabe on top of them and make a sandwich out of it. There's never really leftovers, but if there are, they go to lunch immediately. You can't really eat chicken cutlets. They're obviously breaded and fried because, we fry everything, and that's just what makes it great. Even though it's probably awful for you, that's okay. You do that with mashed potatoes and corn. Now, I didn't realize growing up that these things are both considered starches. I know, funny. Laugh at me all you want. Because a potato, in any form thereof, was theoretically the starch, if you will. And anything that just wasn't that was a vegetable, right? Who said it had to be green? So, yeah. And you can't really deviate from this. You're not going to suddenly have asparagus. That's not going to happen. No, illegal. Not with a chicken cutlet. Not going to happen. You may introduce red roasted peppers to the table that have already been taken care of and have been in the fridge for a while. That's acceptable. You may definitely have a salad, but a good Italian is going to eat that salad at the end of their meal. Why? Because it helps you digest. It is not a thing that you start a meal with. Restaurants will have you believe this, but that's not the case. So actually, you should have your salad at the end. Red wine, always a staple, because the digestive properties of both the salad, the lettuce, and the olive oil, there's no doubt in the vinaigrette that you've eaten on the salad, and any kind of citrus or lemon and in the wine help you process the food. So they always do that toward the end of a meal. Generally speaking, you're also going to see fruit and nuts and cheese at the end of a meal. So it's always like this big course situation, certainly in Italy, and definitely when a holiday or a big Sunday dinner happens in an Italian household. One of those things that generally goes with that is meatballs. I have such wonderful memories, and luckily am fortunate enough to still have that smell that I wake up to, where there's meatballs. Somebody's cooking meatballs. Somebody's making pizzelles. Where are they? And you smell that smell. My dad was a notorious baker, had spent a lot of time baking, and my mom's quite the pizzelle maker, and she makes fantastic meatballs. Everybody argues that their mom's meatballs are better, but mine really are. So it's unfortunate for all your other moms out there. You could be second, third, 5 millionth place. That's fine, but my mommy wins. Game over. Sorry. Don't believe it. You should try it, and then we'll have a little meatball showdown. But meatballs, fresh parsley, typically grown in that windowsill, and on a fork. Here you go. Yum. Before they ever even touch any kind of gravy or go near any kind of pasta, just eating the meatballs. The problem is, it's like the chicken cutlets. The minute they come out of the fryer, everybody wants to eat them. And that leads me to, because we have this meatball thing going on, many people are weird about what you would call Italian wedding soup. There's nothing Italian or wedding about it, okay? Let's talk about a bad name. Nomenclature, wrong. It's technically escarole, okay? People call it scarole because it is escarole, literally, the veggie, the green, inside typically a chicken broth, and there's a cheese and egg combination that is put together and fried that's cut up and put into the soup. Some people put orzo or actual pieces of chicken. We don't. Again, I grew up with mom's version, and I think hers is the best, but that's me. I'm obviously biased. And little baby meatballs. Now, for those of you who don't think that you need meatballs in that, A, you're wrong. And B, for those of you that think in any situation, whether it's soup or in some sort of pasta situation, if you just make meatballs, like the raw meat, and don't fry them first, and then put them in whatever application you are doing, I don't know. Are you into E. coli, salmonella, whatever that is that would possibly hurt you? Because that's just disgusting. First of all, they're not going to cook. You might think that, and maybe like science will tell you that's the case. But no, okay? So unless you're into like serious carpaccio and you want raw meat, no. Meatballs need to be fried. Yeah, you can bake them and they're probably healthier, but they don't taste as good. Facts. I don't care what chef is trying to sell you what. Meatballs need to be fried. Yes, lots of oil, fry. And even the little baby meatballs that go into the soup, they're fried. And then, they heat up in the soup. So if anything, they cook more and get a wonderful caramelization crusty on the outside of them. If you're just dumping raw meatballs into any kind of gravy and just hoping that they're going to cook because, it's been hours and I'm simmering, they're still going to look pink and white and disgusting and gross. No, and no. So now that we got that taken care of, moving on. Sausage and peppers. Salsiccio, if you will. Sausage and peppers, funny thing, because it's typically a little bit of onion and green pepper with that. Not that you can't eat a red pepper on sausage, but when you see it, it's generally green pepper. The funny thing to this is never cut the peppers or onions in rings. That is a no-no. You cut them up in little pieces. It's just, is it going to taste the same? I mean, psychologically, no. In reality, yeah, probably. But that's one of those serious sticking points. Calzone. Love talking about calzone. So everybody wants to say calzone. I get it. You're lazy. You don't want to say the E on the end. Here's my problem with that. Being a linguist and speaking Spanish and Italian, I can tell you, you don't want to say that. You don't want to drop that E. In Spanish, calzone is underwear. So if you want to walk into a place and order some underwear, help yourself. But if you're overseas, you definitely don't want to do this. You will be looked at funny. Calzone. Don't drop the E. It can be lethal. That is a little cheesy thing, by the way, that generally is akin to pizza or stromboli. Panna cotta. A lot of people misinterpret this. So there's panettone and there's panna cotta. Panna cotta is cold dessert that generally has custard involved and sometimes crumbled different type of nut on top, and it's meant as a dessert. And panettone is meant as a dessert, but that's more of like a bread and you see them often like hanging from specialty shops. It's almost like a little cube of bread that often has either chocolate in it or a flavor to the cake inside. Could be lemon, could be chocolate chips, could be orange, whatever, they vary. But that's more of a cut and eat dry thing, whereas panna cotta generally served in a little ramekin. And I would say it's the Italian answer to creme brulee, but thicker and certainly colder, served like an ice cream situation. I love arguing about pancetta and porchetta. Again, we have the sh problem. So Rush actually made I saw them once live, R.I.P. Neil Peart, and they have the song Red Porchetta, which they say, and Getty later apologized to people saying, no, I didn't really know my Italian well enough, and it's really porchetta. So it is. It's just basically pork and pork shanks, etc. And pancetta is their version of bacon. It's just cut up pieces of little bits of ham. Sometimes you'll see prosciutto with that in a different pasta or something of that nature. You might see in a carbonara, black crushed pepper, little bits of crumbled prosciutto, peas, and whatever it is, usually some sort of tortellini or in like a it looks like Alfredo, but it's actually different. It's more of like a cream sauce with an egg base. They're pretty yummy. Lasagna. Okay, so everybody knows that's the stackable thing. Garfield loves it. But again, they pluralize with vowels. So lasagna would literally be one noodle. Now, we just call it that because it's one big lasagna. But when you cut it and you layer it, it's really lasagne. So think about like linguine is literally a bunch of noodles in a bowl, because linguine, ending with an E, would be one noodle. So you want to eat the lasagne, really, but everybody says lasagna. And sometimes my mom has a bad habit of just cutting off the N, saying lasagne. Again, that GN is that sort of nyuk, nyuk, nyuk sound that's created by a tilde in Spanish and the GN in Italian. I love garlic, so I saved one of my best for last. Aglio e olio. No one says this right. Aglio is garlic, ajo in Spanish. A, as in the letter E, pronounced A, meaning and olio, oil. So garlic and oil. I have grown up hearing aioi. I have heard very many variations of this, most of which I can't even pronounce or replicate, so I won't do any justice to it, therefore I won't. But aglio e olio is literally garlic and oil. It is a gravy-less, if you will, I'll say sauce in this case, but not really a sauce. It is garlic and oil. It's all it is. It's pasta and garlic and oil, or some sort of macaroni, typically in garlic and oil. Love it. Very yummy. Love garlic, so I'm always pro for that one. But it is definitely a different problem when it comes to saying that. It's very dialectual depending on where you're from and whatnot. In terms of other weird words, I'll say, so eggplant's eggplant. Most people are okay with that, whether you're having it fried eggplant or parmigiano, which mom tells me, by the way, once you cut it, you actually have to slice the eggplant really thin. It's all about really thin, just like the lunch meat, and let it sit out on paper towels so that, quote unquote, from mom, all the yucky water can come out of it. I don't know what that means. I just eat it. I don't want to see the process. It's like raw chicken. Call me when it's cooked. I don't cook, I eat. But so if you're making eggplant, fried eggplant or eggplant parm, you want to take your time. As Alton Brown says, your patience will be rewarded. So definitely slice it thin and let it hang out for a while on some paper towels. And then, and only then, once you've let it leak out, if you will, and dry it, you can use it. Another time-consuming thing that I just love to consume but have no clue how to make because I'm domestically useless is braciole, which so many people call braciole. And again, I get it. Easier to say, lazier on the lips. It is a thin steak, a very thin meat, and typically it's rolled up with garlic inside, or you can put cheese inside. Some people do put broccoli rabe inside, or just straight up garlic. I'm a garlic fan. And typically it's simmered for hours and hours, held together with toothpicks. Don't forget to take them out, or it will hurt when you go to bite them. One of my favorites, because I'm a total meatitarian. I am complete carnivore. Dessert realm. Pasticceria is, where you would go, basically bakery, And a panaderia is really a bakery, but a pasticceria was a style there. So my dad used to say, bust a chut. And I was thinking, that just sounds disgusting. What are you doing? Who are you busting up? What? Who's chut? So it was a little pastry, for lack of better wording, and a lot of mispronounced words. So sfogliatelle shows up. People call them sfogliatelle. They cut off the vowel. That's like a really common mistake. And then often people will have, Italian cookies, they kind of just call Italian cookies, but you'll see that a lot downtown, or they'll say by the pound of different things. And people say macaroons. Okay, for the most part, macaroon, I understand. Because then there's the French argument of that too. They are different, very different. Some say macaron. I fight with my niece about this all the time. They're different. French version's much smaller, comes in different flavors. Typically, the Italian ones are really just coconut And I've seen chocolate coconut, kind of a fraud. Same idea with pretzels. Again, to me, that's the black licorice flavor that's anisette based. But I have seen lemon, I have seen orange, I have seen vanilla. Some people, it's to your taste. Obviously, if you're baking it, then bake what you like. Biscotti. So bis is again, if you will, and cotti is past tense of cook. So twice cooked, which is funny because my dad made really fluffy, for lack of better wording, I'll say soft biscuits. The biscotti was not twice cooked. He actually didn't put his back in. So they were very soft, and he was complimented all the time. Everybody always wanted them because they were not hard as a brick. If you buy, I'll say not homemade, wrapped in plastic biscotti, it's probably, you can throw it against the wall and it'll either shatter or break your wall. I don't recommend eating it, but people do that all the time. So just be aware. You don't necessarily have to put them back in. If you do want them crispy, by all means, put them back in for a little bit, but you're essentially making like a log. It's cool to watch him do it, and it's a shame he's gone now. He used to make this little like moat and knead the dough, and then once he got it all together, it made this little log, and then he would cook that and then slice them up. And usually once you slice them up, people would put them back in for a few minutes to toast them, but he never did. He would just let them sit, and they would just be eaten really soft, and people liked them because they were super soft. So there's a million more things that I could say, but these are all, I'd say, the basics of food that people come upon and don't think about, or they pronounce wrong, or they don't know what they're saying, or they're not sure. And hopefully I've been helpful and you can say them correctly, or at least point and snicker. But these are pretty common things. And again, if you're from the Philadelphia area and you grew up in that Little Italy part of the city, then it's going to mean something to you. I would hope if this reaches any New Yorkers, then they might get a kick out of it as well. And whether you're Italian or not, everybody eats. So there's always that. So I hope you enjoyed today. And if you liked what you heard, then check out eclecticcollectionpodcast.com or listen to us on your preferred platform. I'm Terry Tenaglia, which is really, by the way, Tenalia, because the AGL configuration makes an al noise, just like in garlic. Neglected to mention that. But hey, I'm used to being called lots of different things. So thanks for listening.